All right, good evening, everybody. I was having some issues how to respond to this controversy that's come up about Whoopi Goldberg and her comments on a television show called The View, which I don't think anybody actually watches, but we all know about it because of the clips that have been put out on Twitter and so forth, and they talk about it on the radio. And she said, I believe they were discussing what Joy Behar said was a ban on a book called Mouse, which is a graphic novel about the Holocaust where mice represent the Jews and the cats represent the Nazis. And as far as what I saw, there was a discussion between Joy Behar and Maim Bialik, who's a Shomer Shabbos, about this issue. And to me, the first thing is shameful that Joy Behar said there's a ban, because there is no ban. Removal from a curriculum is not a ban. It's removal from a curriculum. So whatever side you have on this issue, and it's about one state, Tennessee, where this book was removed from a curriculum, was not banned, it's still available, I believe, in the libraries and everything, it's simply removed from the curriculum. It might still be suggested and so forth, but it's not banned. And in certain ways, my understanding is this lie that this book was banned has made the sales of the book go up. So all of my books should get banned, right? I have a few books on Amazon. All of those should get banned too. So, it's like the joke that Rabbi Fishbane told. There was during the Gulf War, there was a Yerushalmi Yid in Meir Shorim. He was asking, what's a days to do a zach, a Scud missile, what's a Scud missile? He didn't know what was a Scud missile, so someone was explaining to him how expensive it is to build one of these missiles. How much money it costs to build a missile. So, fallen off manhos. He said, if only would be such a thing should fall on my house. Such an expensive thing, they're dropping out of the sky. It's an Einfall. So the same thing, if you get banned, and even though he didn't get banned, it's an Einfall. So, but anyway, I've never read this book. I understand that it's appropriate, but still it could be offensive. Certain things. What I think the reason why it was removed was because of depictions of nudity in the context of the Holocaust. Just like in the movie Schindler's List. So I'll tell you something about that subject before we get to Whoopi Goldberg. So I went one time to Yad Vashem. They took us in yeshiva to Yad Vashem. And who gave us the tour was Rabbi Dr. Usher Wade. Focus on sign. Rabbi Wade is a Ger Chassid, and he's a Ger Tzedek. He was a pastor, actually stationed in Germany as a military chaplain. He was a Methodist pastor, married the daughter of a German Methodist pastor. And he and his wife, they were reading in the newspaper about Kristallnacht. And when they came to this story, in the newspaper, they were looking at the pictures and they realized that wherever it was that they lived, don't know if they lived in Munich or Berlin, wherever it was. The pictures were all local, and it affected him very strongly. Who was at the time this pastor, Chaplain Wade, who was an American Army chaplain, and he started to ask the elder pastors, who this was, I'm assuming, the late 1970s, early 1980s, this was happening. So it was only 30, 40 years after these events. And he asked the pastors there, how many Jews did you save? They said, what are you talking about? Then he was also an academic. He was a PhD. Asked all his professors, how many Jews did you save? What are you talking about? So he realized something is wrong, and it gave him also a theological issue. And he realized, he started to look at the Bible, and he realized, in the back of the Bible, what they had in their Bibles, all this very nebulous ideas, but nothing really concrete. And in the front, it's do this, do that, right? And he realized that, you really want to build a relationship with God, you need to do this, do that stuff. And so it came eventually, Dortmund in Germany, him and his wife and his kids, they became Gerim. They converted to Judaism. And then he moved back to his native Virginia. He was he moved to Richmond, and he davened in the shul. This was before I was born, Bistama. He davened in the shul where I was the Rav many, many years later, decades later. And then he moved to Yerushalayim, and he lives in Yerushalayim, and he learned in Or Sameach. I also learned in Or Sameach. So anyway, Rabbi Wade, soll gesund sein, he took us on the tour of Yad Vashem. And so one of the halls in Yad Vashem is the pictures that contain nudity, which the people at Yad Vashem who made the museum there, they have their reason why they feel it's appropriate, because it's to teach how evil the Nazis were, that they sought to dehumanize the Jewish people by removing their clothes. But Dr. Wade, Rabbi Wade, he said, first of all, in Jewish law, we're not allowed to look at pictures of naked people, even though this is not something that would cause any arousal in any normal person to see such a thing. But nonetheless, it remains prohibited, even not for the purposes of arousal. That's his understanding, especially he's a Gerach Chassid, and the Gerach Chassidim are very, very strict about inyanim of Kedusha, about concepts of holiness, and therefore, and he's right. There's there's a possibility for medical reasons, to learn about these things and so forth. It's a different thing, but there's his understanding, and I would agree, in a halachic sense, there's nothing to justify to look at these pictures, and it's absolutely prohibited. Obviously, all the more so if they're arousing, but without that, nonetheless, there's no justified reason to look at these pictures. Now, it's different mouse. These are cartoons of mice. This is not drawings of human beings. But I understand if people in Tennessee have their feelings about this, to feel that it's inappropriate and might not be appropriate for children, just in the same way that, although it's different, of what Rabbi Wade was talking about at Yad Vashem. And the truth is, there's a reason why the one who was called the Kalavar Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael, who was a Rav in Ohio for a while in Cleveland, and is a Ben Acher Ben from Rabbi Isaac Kalavar, and he was a Choshev Yid. I used to go daven there sometimes. Why he wanted to make a Frum Holocaust museum, Shema Yisrael museum. And I don't know, now his wife's grandson is Gavarn, the Rebbe, okay, it's interesting. I think he's working towards something like this, would make the museum. I don't know whatever happened with that. But anyway, I'm saying it that way because my Rebbe is Kalavar Rebbe, who all the way back to Rabbi Isaac Kalavar, they were all Kalavar Rebbes, whereas the one in Yerushalayim, his father was not Kalavar Rebbe, his Zayda was not Kalavar Rebbe. I think maybe it was Elter Zayda or Elter Zayda that was called Kalavar Rebbe, but nonetheless they were Rabbonim and they were Rebbes. Just they didn't call themselves Kalavar Rebbe, so it's just that's all. There's a reason I picked the name to be Koblenz Roof, because nobody else. And in Koblenz, I don't think they have a Rav right now. There's a regional chief rabbi who visits Koblenz sometimes, but he himself is an interesting character. But so I didn't call myself Krula or Chenger because already how many Krula Rebbes and how many Chenger Rebbes and so forth, even though they're different mishpachas. So anyway, back to this story, but still with respect to the one who called himself Kalavar Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael. There was a reason why. We needed a Frum Holocaust museum, or why there's the term Masorah. They make videos with Frum ideology about the Holocaust, because we need a proper Frum outlook, hashkafa, on the Holocaust. So anyway, and we could talk about that another time. In any event, this story with Whoopi Goldberg, first of all, I don't think she meant anything disrespectful in what she said. But what she said was, it was not about race, it was two different groups of white people. And so people bring up this question, are Jews white? Now the thing is, by the what do they call it? The census every year, they ask for race, right? So they consider Middle Eastern, like Arab people, to be white. So if the Arabs are white, then even understanding that the Jews coming from the Levant, they would be white, just like the Arabs are white. So whatever that means. I mean, all of these racial ideas are really stupid, and that's really what we really have to come down to about this subject. And like I said before, the people who teach CRT, they get a few things right, even though the things they get right, they twist around in the wrong way. But when it comes to the idea of race, the truth truth is, there are more differences within the classical races that we understand than there are between the different races. Meaning the level of difference within the various tribes in Africa, various parts of Africa. There's a tremendous amount of biological genetic diversity. But we just call them all black, right? Even though they're very diverse. And so too among the white peoples. Again, the census considers Middle Eastern people to be white, all the different European groups to be white, and then Asian also. Big differences, even within China, with the different ethnic groups within China, and then the other countries in the Far East, say Asian. We have all of these different, first of all, Indian and the Chinese and the Japanese and the Korean and the Laotian and Vietnamese. There's tremendous diversity, genetically, biologically. Nonetheless, we're all human beings. We're all the same species. None of these are even a subspecies. We can all naturally come together, produce offspring that are fertile, etc. Why? Because we all come from Adam Arishon. We all come from Adam. And there's really only the one race, the human race. Now, Jews are an interesting group. Judaism is a religion. And anyone who converts to Judaism in the proper manner is 100% a Jew. And even people who don't convert perhaps in the proper manner, their Jewish identity is not something to sneeze at. Meaning, first of all, within the African American communities, you have a lot of people who have some sort of a Jewish identity. And we don't know what kind of conversions, if they had any conversions, what, where, when, right? Someone like Marilyn Monroe, for her whole life identified, after she converted, she identified with the Jewish people very much. Even though halachically her conversion was totally meaningless because there was no mikveh, there was no Kabbalas HaMitzvahs. So it's a very complicated issue. Very, very complicated. But nonetheless, the various Jewish communities tend to have very homogeneous genetics. The Ashkenazic community is quite a homogeneous genetic community. The various Sephardic communities also tend to be very homogeneous genetically. But nonetheless, Jews are not a race. But again, when we talk about these ideas of race, the idea of race is a social construct. Because, like we said, there's more genetic diversity within the races than there is between the races. Meaning the degree of difference between black and white and Asian and other racial groups. The degree in the big picture is smaller than the degrees of differences within these various groups, right? Various peoples, Roma people, and and others, that we have these various groups that exist. However, the Nazis believed in ideas of eugenics and believed in a racial ideology. And so they saw Jews as an inferior race, as Whoopi Goldberg expressed. However, I'll say something which will be very controversial. People get very upset because back in the 1970s, even earlier really, the UN said Zionism is racism. This very same UN that gave the Zionists their state that they call a Jewish state. Also later, I guess, recanted somewhat that Zionism is racism. Although I know Martin Luther King, he was very upset about that, to say Zionism is racism. But if we see Judaism not as a religion, so which the Zionists, even the religious Zionists, see Jewish identity as not necessarily being linked to being religious. So then Zionism is racism. It is, meaning not in the new definition of racism, that racism is only white supremacy, but in the idea that race is something that matters, and all this care about, this focus on race. So therefore, why are people upset when you say Zionism is racism, but then they also get upset when something like this, it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too. Meaning they're upset that Whoopi Goldberg said that Jews are white, but they're also upset that the UN said Zionism is racism. So which one is it? Meaning, because the truth is, essentially, she's right, Judaism is a religion. Anyone from any race can convert to Judaism. Whoopi Goldberg claims some kind of a Jewish identity. I don't know what it's based on. She claims, that something in her mother's family or something, that they had some kind of a Jewish ancestry. And that's why she took a stage name Goldberg. It's not her birth name was Johnson. Her father was a preacher, a Baptist minister. Again, but she identifies as a non-religious Jew, kind of like how Marilyn Monroe did after her Reform conversion. She didn't see herself as a Reform Jew. She saw herself as a secular Jew. That was the statement that she said. And again, I understand in halacha, if someone's mother is Jewish, they are what we would call born Jewish, right? But the way I like to say it is that they are non-Gentiles. That's the way I like to frame it. Because we make a bracha shalayas and igoy, right? There's nothing wrong to be a Gentile. So there's something wrong to be a Jewish apostate or an ex-Jew within the rubric of Judaism. So and within the rubric of halachic Judaism, Marilyn Monroe is not Jewish, Whoopi Goldberg is not Jewish, and Elvis Presley is what we would call a halachic Jew, or a non-Gentile, even though he was a devout Christian, right? Because his mother's mother was Jewish, right? Even though most likely we don't have any ages to establish something like that, but he used to be like a Shabbos goy or something, and he probably wasn't supposed to be, right? It's like I worked in a bummer colony, and there was a Russian working there, and the Hasidic Rebbe, that Werner Rebbe, was there, and after they had one of the workers do something, turn on a fan or something, I said, not all you should watch out. Some of these guys, they might be Jewish. So they asked the Russian guy, "You Jewish?" He said, "No, me no Jewish. My mother Jewish. Me no Jewish." And meanwhile, we had a guy, Willie, who wore a bekisha, had appeared in Payas, African American fellow. He never formally converted, as far as I know, but he said he converted, and he would wear a bekisha on Shabbos and a hat. He identified very much with the Hasidic community. He never converted. And he said, his Jewish name is Isaac, and so he wouldn't do any malacha on Shabbos, Willie. Right? So that's what I was going to say, though, about this idea of being born Jewish. If you believe in halacha, it means something. If you don't believe in halacha, it doesn't mean anything. So I would venture to say someone who doesn't believe in God at all should not have a Jewish identity. As opposed to someone who's religious, the Reform, they understand it's not racist for them to have their ideas of what makes someone a Jew. Because it's based on a belief in God, even though it's different than our beliefs, even though it's a non-halachic belief.